Welcome back to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Richard Thompson. Today, I am joined by Adrian Nisbet, CEO of The Endgame and a former commercial pilot turned private equity executive who now helps family businesses define their future with clarity and courage. From working in his family's factory at age 10 to putting wages on personal credit cards, Adrian has lived the pressure most founders quietly carry. In this episode, you'll learn how to find your end game, avoid creeping normality, and build a business that serves your life. Whether you're scaling or stuck, this conversation is for you. All right, let's get into it. Adrian Nisbet, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very, very good to be with you. Thanks, Richard.
You are the CEO of The Endgame.
Yep, that's right.
Tell me, as an elevator pitch, tell me what you do.
The end game is really we're what you'd call a fractional executive suite, but what we really are is an alternative for family businesses or founders to hiring a general manager, a CEO, or an executive suite. And generally speaking, during a time that some change needs to happen in the business, and or the founder's looking to step back and maybe take more of a board role. And so there's a lot of change that goes on during that, and we form that fractional team during those times.
Take me back, because what you're doing at the moment is really inspiring in the SME space, the small to medium enterprise. But tell me back to your upbringing. You're a commercial pilot as well.
Yeah.
What drew you to business? Tell me some more.
It's a little strange kind of start, I guess. We were, I was originally trained as a commercial pilot and on my way off to the airlines. But I started in business, in the family business, and I started there at probably about the age of 10 or 12 or something like that.
What was mum and dad doing?
They had a business that they'd started back in the 80s, and it was actually the first of the kind of radio-based telemetry, which probably won't mean a lot to a lot of people. But in essence, it was the first of the sort of stuff that would then become automation and control systems for sort of town water supplies and electrical distribution networks and things.
And you were working there as 10?
Yeah, I was working in the factory when I was about 10, and as a lot, I think, of family business works. That's where it all begins, right? You're doing little jobs in the factory. You're shredding stuff, you're doing all sorts of little bits and pieces to start off in the family business. And so my journey was, sort of started off there, and then I was off to the airlines and going about that. But later into my, late teens and early 20s, I came to the realization that family business looked quite good to the outside, to an outsider. And my father was a brilliant engineer, but the technical was his thing. He knew how to do a really good job for the clients. He knew the technical, but he'd not really had a business background. And I guess it was the first of the realization for me that you could have a successful business and to the outsider, the family business looked at successful, but wasn't really worth a lot, not a lot of enterprise value. This was planned to be the superannuation fund and the retirement fund. And there's not a lot there when it's so heavily reliant on my father. So that was my first kind of entry, I guess, into what do we do. And I spent the first decade of my career, really, or more, getting the family out of that. And off to private equity sales.
Was that at the forefront of your father's mind, or was that something, that key person risk and trying to, in the succession plan of that family business, is that something that he brought to the table, or did you have to see that from a different angle and explain that to him?
It was never really on his mind. I mean, again, he was and I think typical of a lot of founders that we work with today, they keep going down the path of building more and more value in the business without really thinking about how that really converts to, enterprise value or some sale or whatever the case may be. And so he kind of got to a position of being later into the journey and realizing that not a lot of succession planning had really been done. Now, maybe the extent of his succession planning was to have 2 boys, and he thought, well, there's the succession plan. Yeah. But it's more complex than that. And we work with a lot of family businesses now around those sorts of succession things, and how that works, and whether or not the family even wants to be involved. I was going to be an airline pilot. My brother's an engineer, and funnily enough, still involved in that family business. Is not owned by the family anymore. He's still involved, but there's no guarantees really that the children are going to want to take on the family business.
Simon Sinek talks about how business is an infinite game, and the primary role of an infinite game is to stay in the game. And do you think that skews that, or that puts a founder at a disadvantage or prejudices them, because by virtue of that, you're not really thinking about the succession plan, the end point of it?
I think absolutely. I think it is hard for the mindset, I think, to really be that it's ending. I mean, we could go on for hours about the sorts of mindsets that go on in founders as they go through a journey, perhaps through midlife, and then perhaps through getting towards retirement, and then my whole purpose, my whole being has been this, and my identity is this business, and then losing that or transferring that has a lot of emotional things tied up in it. It's not as simple as, I'm going to sell the business and off I go. So I definitely think that it is very common for founders to really not think about what's going to happen in succession, not want to deal with that, and as you say, keep going on with the game of business. But eventually, age catches up with everyone.
Before now advising with the end game, you've been a CEO, founder, board member. Are there any lessons that you've learnt the hard way that you've now used, leaning on those experiences to give advice?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I think a number of things that I've unfortunately had to learn the very hard way. I talk a bit about first in the family business, but then within the private equity space, and having situations where we were not, probably back in those days, I was not as financially competent, if you like, as I am today, and not really thinking enough about, cash flows and things like that. And I have had various situations, even before the private equity stage, of really nearly losing the lot. And those are really the hard lessons.
Talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, I think the first one was, and it's really something that we now deal with so many times, so many times with founders. But it's that hire of a general manager, the hire of a CEO. I'm doing the right thing. Off I go. I'm doing what the book says. Right. I'm empowering the team. I'm bringing somebody in that's going to be able to do that. It's going to allow me to work on strategy. All the right things, but the reality is that if you're not very careful about how this is done, you can get yourself into a really sticky situation quickly. And the reality is, for me, one of that first kind of general manager hire, once I'd worked out that the business had become, in quite a lot of financial distress, it was very close to too late. And of course, moved the general manager on, but then working out that we didn't have, cash to be able to pay the wages. We didn't have, the ability to be able to pay suppliers and those sorts of things. And really, I can actually recall very much sitting there thinking to myself, I'm not only about to fail in this business, but it's going to bring the family down with me. And that was really difficult. I remember put the wages bill on a personal credit card, that sort of stuff. When you're in that phase, what am I going to do? I got to go through the next steps. I got to make it to next week. And unfortunately, we'd built up a really good reputation with our clients, and we'd built up a really good relationship with our clients, and we were able to leverage that really by being honest, by coming and talking to the clients and saying, look, this is what we've done, this is where we've ended up, and we were actually able to leverage that goodwill to be able to get ourselves back on our feet.
Yeah, wow. Being vulnerable.
Yeah, that's right. In the finish, didn't intend to go in there and be vulnerable, but at the end of the day, that was just what we naturally did, and we sort of went and said, this is where we're at, put our cards on the table and said, this is the situation, and we're going to fix it, but we need your support.
And in that moment of where you're really struggling paying wages on personal credit cards, like you said, are you leaning into your family at that point, or are you holding the cards to yourself and dealing with it?
Yeah, no. My brother and I were in that situation together, and certainly we both knew how bad it was, but we didn't share as much of that information with the rest of the family. We got in there and thought we got to fix this.
Yeah, right. When was that pivot moment of going, the end game is what I need to. That's where the paths are leading, and I need to be able to create a company that can assist these issues.
Yeah, and that's kind of probably a couple of decades down the path, really. After we'd sold the business to private equity, I started working in CEO roles in private equity space. But really, it was always dealing with family dynamics, and so the issues I was dealing with in CEO roles were really not that different to what I'd experienced in our own integration within a private equity firm. So after a number of years of doing that, I realised that what I really wanted to do was support the families themselves. You know, it wasn't the corporate. Corporate wasn't, my purpose, my inner being, if you like, or whatever it was. It was really getting back to family businesses in Australia. They don't have a lot of support. There's a lot of support if you're a corporate. There's lots of big consulting firms. If you're a big corporate, there's actually quite a lot of support if you want to go and do a startup, get venture capital. But the mid-sized family business is often in a bit of a forgotten space, and they reach out for support, but oftentimes it's not fit for purpose. It's very theoretical, or it might be great support from accountants and lawyers and like yourself, but it's not the whole picture, right? And being able to actually provide real practical support to get a change to happen in the organisation is something that it's kind of my purpose in life, I guess, is to really make that available for more family businesses.
Is the process then encouraging or giving the business, a particular business, the tools to define the end for the business? How do you view that going into the business? And if they're not so definitive of where this is headed, is the process, well, where are we? Where are we
going? Yeah, and that's where the name The End Game came from. And I talk about some stories about kind of writing the end game on for businesses on the back of a beer coaster, like actually saying, this has to be that simple, that it's not about having a 200-page report from a consulting firm.
Do you think people overcomplicate it sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's probably the most common thing that I see. It is, where is the end game, and what does that look like in simple terms? Not to go through the full boring stories, but I had an experience with a board some years ago where they're really just in a position of not knowing what to do. The business was in a fair bit of crisis, and we actually were sitting around the table after a board meeting in the pub, and literally I got a beer coaster from there, and I said, well, what does success look like? They were losing a lot of money at the time, and I sort of said, well, would success look like making $1 million a year? We're currently losing $1 million a year. Oh, yeah, there's a fair bit of nodding around the table. I'm like, well, that goes at the top right-hand side of the beer coaster, and now we're at the bottom left-hand side of the beer coaster. Let's start drawing a line.
How that works.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because, from that actually came a lot of the plans. From that came a lot of what are the budgets? What are the forecasts? What are we trying to do? What are we changing? What are the people? What are the resources we need, to go and start doing that? But it doesn't have to be complicated. We just have to start with the moonshot. We have to start with what is it? What are we trying to achieve?
Where do you find that though? Because I understand you've got to have that something in that top right hand corner.
Yeah,
you need something.
Yeah,
and particularly it's challenging. Like as an athlete, success is objective. You win or you lose. Winter Olympics are on at the moment.
Yeah,
very easy to see whether you've won or you lost.
Yeah,
in business, more so, more challenging to understand whether or not we are successful. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this element of success is sort of so grey and subjective in business. Obviously, losing $1 million a year is fairly objectively
not successful,
unideal. But then you go, oh, great. And I sort of feel like if businesses and even here generally, like I have this idea that we can achieve anything.
Yeah,
and that's almost hard because then you go, well, what are we actually going for? What is it? And if you did if you made widgets, you go, well, the common mentality is we sold 100 widgets last year, so this year we're going to sell 100. The goal is 110, and it's like, well, there's almost solace in that. There's security in that it is the finish line, or it is the carrot. But is that success? Could we have got 120? Could we build a team to make 200?
Yeah,
like I find it infinitely frustrating where that the concept of success in business is so subjective that it almost makes you unwilling to put something on right in that top right hand corner.
Yeah, it's very interesting perspective to put on that, and I think that is a lot of the time what we are getting founders to do, whether it's right or wrong, or it's going to change tomorrow or this afternoon or whatever, is actually going through and saying, what is possible, what can we actually do here, what is potential from this business, but then very much linked back to, well, what does the end game look like for you personally, and that's where I think a lot of work is never done in the corporate world and business space. A lot forget that point. And it is easy to get over that and say, well, this business could be making whatever. But is that what success looks like for Richard?
100%, right? And everyone's individual, but you sort of feel like the fulfillment of the journey, the challenge of building or challenge of creating something is the fulfilling piece, is the successful piece. And you don't want to go backwards, otherwise the lights turn off.
Yeah.
But financially that is. But the idea of building anything to get out in 3 years or 5 years or any years terrifies me a little bit. Like you sort of go, well, I want this. What sustains me here is not the financial performance. That's just one sort of measure or data to show that we're doing something successful enough, I guess. But it's the journey of the creation. And so that's where also I come from and go, well, maybe I don't want to say, how do I get out of this? Because I don't really want to get out of it.
And that's a perfectly good answer. And many of the discussions that we have with founders is not about selling. That's not the exit necessarily. But what is common, and I think always needs to be dealt with, is you're not going to be doing what you're doing forever. There's a you're out of coming. But you're out of sport. I mean, you know that your body is not going to be the same, and at some point in time, your mind's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
Now, what are you if purpose is about if your purpose is about building something, maybe it's leaving something for the next generation, or it's maybe just making a difference in the world, then how do you look at what your end game is with relation to that and purposefully go about designing that? And that doesn't mean selling. That means, how do I make sure that can continue? Doesn't have to be a sale event.
I love that. Where do you think business owners, before they see you, before you come in, and where do you think the lowest hanging fruit is for them in terms of turning their ship around and going towards that top right-hand corner of the beer coaster?
Usually it is. I guess I'll answer this in a. I'll go back a step with this. I always thought that the issues were technical. I always would go to, all right, pricing's not right, or margins, or OPEX is not right, or the people don't have the right job description, or whatever the case may be. I always went technical. What I've learnt more and more, particularly in the last few years, is that it's the mindset. It is actually the founder's mindset that we need to. All the technical stuff, we can do all of that. And if we understand what the end game is, the technical stuff, okay, we can go ahead and do it. It's not that difficult. What we deal with more than anything is the founders have a certain identity, and usually we're going about making a change to that identity, and that's fraught with disaster. And that is it's necessary in many cases. It doesn't necessarily have to be done quickly. It could be a longer period of time, but it's necessary in most cases to have this shift of identity. That's where we come across the biggest problems, and that's where we get the most success, when we get that right.
Yeah, okay. Hey team, just popping in to say thanks for listening. If you're enjoying the episode, please take a second to like or follow the show and share it with a friend. It's the best way to help us grow and keep bringing you more great content. All right, let's get back into it. And then in terms of succession planning of a business, you have a founder who, I guess, is the key person or has built
Mhm.
a business from scratch, and then instead of going to the next, holding it to the next generation, but obviously bringing in partners internally, right? And that's probably, and certainly that comes across my desk on a professional level, that's more often than not in
Yeah.
terms of, rather than wholesale out or
Yeah.
being rolled up, it's looking internally.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts or advice on how to manage through that procedure? Obviously, not a roll up through an M&A, but more so bringing people who are in the business as future shareholders or as going into that shareholding position, because those people are not the founder.
No.
And that's probably a good thing.
Mm.
But how do you go from a person, let's say a sole operator who's been playing in the sandpit by themselves for years,
Yeah.
to then bringing in other people in the sandpit and
Yeah.
playing nicely, but not just playing nicely, but you bring them in for the benefit of the sandpit as a whole.
Yeah.
Keep that metaphor going, so that it's a better place.
One thing I would probably say to that is, as much as I've spent a lot of time in this space, a lot of time thinking in this space, and a lot of time dealing with businesses in this space, no one answer fits. Like every situation is a little bit different, and that's what makes it so much fun, I guess, in some ways, but also complex. We're dealing with one business that just comes to mind when you ask at the moment, which is really it's actually a third generation family business, and now run by a CEO, and the family's desire is really to start bringing in the senior management team into that part of the business, into the business, and making that the long term. So they will ultimately continue to maintain shareholding in the business, but as the management come in. What we're finding through that process, and I've got another customer that's a similar sort of situation, is that the relationship, again, that the family has with the business shifts really, in a simple term, from an executive kind of involvement to a board type involvement, and putting that around, and the governance around that, and the way that we deal with the management team or the partners in your situation, I think is a really important part of that, is getting that right, and being able to sort of start to operate less as, Richard runs the show and tells everybody what to do, sort of thing. No, I'm obviously not saying that you do that, but it's, you call the shots, to more of a board style of operating.
Interesting. How often are you seeing a full roll up or acquisition as against internal promotion into ownership?
Generally speaking, a full sale is mostly what does happen, but I would say, greater than 50% would be what happens. But we kind of have a mixture between succession to the next generation.
Sure.
And then the management team coming on. We really like the management team, the people within the business. So we do particularly like to try and take it down that path if at all possible. But it's certainly can create an enormous amount of value for the family, and of course for the people in the business.
In terms of size, though, do you think a family-owned business can run itself pretty clean without that extra layer of governance at a certain size, but as it grows, it sort of requires that? And if so, then at what point have you seen, or do you believe, where you go, you actually do need a level of management here, as against, it was just mum and dad, and the kids, or mum and dad and a few employees. At what point do you go, this is actually a fairly sizable operation?
Yeah, I think these are really, really rough sort of figures, and it really depends on the industry, and obviously a lot of different things. But we see the journey that we go on mostly with clients, where we're sort of operating in that fractional space, is oftentimes getting towards the 10 million revenue mark. Some businesses 5, some businesses 10, and we're often on a journey from 10 to 20. This is real average speaking, but that sort of size. And by the time they get up over 20, 25, then typically the business would have a full kind of executive suite, a CEO operating the business, and a chief of this and a chief of that. But very, very rough sort of figures. That's the sort of thing. And I guess that's our spot in life is often between that 5, 10 and up to 20 sort of thing, where we would typically be out of it by then.
But up until 5, it's probably self-sufficient.
Up until 5 is usually very much controlled by the founder. Very much. The founder is the board and the chief executive and the everything else.
Chief of all hats.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, let's do some practical, useful ideas or thoughts for the listeners that can apply immediately. Defining the end game, that top right hand of the beer coaster, which I love as an analogy. What's the first? If they feel overwhelmed in listening to this, as I have just done in the last half hour, what's the first practical step? What's the first thing to do other than call yourself? Get in touch.
Get in touch, though. If I answer it, really simply, I would say just have a go at something like that. Really simply, pull out the beer coaster, if you like, and try and say to yourself, what does success look like for me personally, and therefore how does the business fit into that? What do I need?
So take some time.
Take some time, yeah.
With your own head to go, what am I actually wanting to achieve?
Yeah, correct. And you've got an idea of, what school the kids want to go to, or what size the house is, or what, I'm certainly not a financial planner. I don't play in that space at all, but, I encourage that sort of thinking. What is it, a Ferrari? Is it a Commodore? Those sorts of things are relevant things to think about. If really what I want to do is go to work 3 days a week and surf, well, that's a very different thing to I want to drive a Lamborghini. So I think that's that sort of thought process, and you'd be I don't think you'd be surprised, but I was surprised, I think, in the early days, and I'm no longer surprised that very few people can articulate that. Personally, even. And it doesn't, I think the scary piece, and if the listeners are sitting there going, oh, this is all pretty scary, I think the scary piece is that getting your head around the fact that having this conversation with yourself or with others is not committing you to having to deliver that.
No.
It's not an expectation.
It's setting the North Star, though, for now.
Yeah, and you're not setting yourself up to fail by having this conversation. I think that's one of the biggest emotional things I see is people don't want to have the conversation because I feel like if I commit to that, then I could fail at this. I think leave that mentality at the side and pull the beer coaster out.
It might be Ferrari today.
Yeah.
And go for that, and then it may change.
Correct.
And that's okay. That's not
fine.
failure, but it's giving you a direction to go for.
Correct.
That's what you need. I love that. What's one financial blind spot that you see repeatedly that I guess most likely erodes the profit? And that's mindset, which you sort of touched on.
Price every time. I think that the mindset that I see most commonly driving poor performance is that I feel like I have to get my price lower and lower in order to somehow be competitive or grow revenue. I think that mindset then links to the whole, revenue is what everything is about mindset. And the reality is very far from that. Revenue, talk about Buffett's conversations about revenue being vanity. Profit is sanity, and cash is reality. And I like that. A lot of that revenue growth mantra then gives you that thought process that in order to do that, I need to drop my price. And I would say that's by far the biggest thing that I come across in business is we've dropped the price so far that we can't possibly have margin here anymore.
Talk to me about how founders or owners can tell the difference between a tough season and something that systemically needs to change, or something that seriously needs to change and pivot.
I think that I talk a little bit about, and it comes from my aviation background. But we talk in aviation about bias, and certainly in the cockpit, you learn in the early days to look out for things like confirmation bias, and for things that would allow you to accept a worsening situation without taking action. Talk about that as creeping normality. The basic
I
idea.
love that that's a part of your aviation,
Yeah.
the aviation course, right?
Yeah. And look, I learnt these things, early days going through aviation, and then
Can you
experiencing
give an example in the cockpit?
Yeah, so in the cockpit, I mean, simplest example in the cockpit is, I'm flying along, and something goes wrong with a mechanical thing. The mechanical thing is not a showstopper. I can continue along with that mechanical issue, and then something else might go wrong in the cockpit to add to that. But in those two instances, I have managed to make myself normalize that. I've normalized a mechanical fault, and I've then normalized something else. Now, maybe 3 or 4 problems or 5 problems creates what we call the Swiss cheese effect, and suddenly I'm in the side of the hill, right? So it's not allowing those new normals to accumulate, and without asking yourself the question, is this getting out of control now? Am I really? I've now got this problem. I've got that problem. The weather's deteriorating. Things are accumulating here. I can't allow myself to just take each instance as a new normal. Simple explanation of it. There's obviously lots to that, but I would say in business, I look at the same thing. I've had a lot of experience going in and looking into businesses that are in crisis, and I would say without exception, there's not a single one that happened overnight. All right, they all had some extent of creeping normality. They all had some extent where we were sitting in multiple meetings over multiple years, excusing poorer and poorer performance, putting it down to it'll be better next month, putting it down to it'll be better then, or this will happen or that'll happen. I would say that the biggest thing is that mentality is not allowing that to happen. So if you've got a bad season, you got a bad season. But is that season worse than the last one? Is it accumulating? Where are we really at? And I think if you're honest with yourself, and you really look at it, I don't think you'll have too much trouble identifying whether or not this is an issue or not.
That's so wonderfully told. It's human behavior to accept, to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and to have some level of empathy or forgiveness, or probably to a certain degree as well, sweeping something under the carpet, or going, that's fine, we'll wait till next month, or let's see how this goes, and then 3 months later, 5 months later, 10 months later, 3 years later. But I guess it's trying to draw that line in the sand and say, well, we'll give you another month. Let's look at it another month, but that's it, and make that decision. When you make that, you're not reassessing the decision in a month's time. You say, well, if this isn't fixed within a month, set yourself a deadline.
That's perfect, actually. I love that, and I think that we used to do that. My brother and I, when we were first in the family business, we made that. We were in our 20s at the time. We made that a thing, and it's something I've lived by since. Is make the decision now or something in the future,
and live by that.
Yeah. Don't come back and excuse it. You made the decision 4 weeks ago, and you said if this thing was going to be like this, then I would make the decision. That's a very, very, very good habit to get into, and I think I agree with you completely.
Speaking of habits, is there anything that you've come across with successful founders that they instill in their life, business, personal, otherwise, that it's consistent across them?
Yeah, look, I think the successful founders, and it's going to sound perhaps strange, but I think the most successful founders are not over-indexed on the business life. The successful founders are successful in their family life. They have things outside of the business. The people that I work with that end up in this kind of consistent revolving situation of stress and anxiety and pressure, and therefore don't actually get the results, are the ones that really over-index on that.
So the ones that are doing well are the ones with the balance.
With the balance, yeah. They're not.
Have you found? Do you believe the balance has been there the whole time, or do you think the balance is where they've found you, or that you've seen them, and they've actually had a season of unbalanced at the early stages?
Yeah, look, a lot of times when founders come and start dealing with us, they are unbalanced. A lot of the time they are just stressed and, I don't really know what to do next. And, I've got to this place and I'm just putting out fires and I'm doing whatever I need to do. So it definitely, that's very, very common at that point. When we start working with the founders, I guess it's the ones that can make that shift that are really able to get the performance out of the business in the long term. I think every founder I've ever dealt with has been through periods of stress and working long hours and doing. I've never met one. I mean, maybe you don't. I don't know.
I was up at 12:30. I went to bed at 12:30 last night.
Yeah,
if that's
correct.
anything.
Yeah. So every founder has those things, and I don't think that changes. But I think the most successful in business also have a healthy. Have healthy relationships outside of the business. They have healthy habits outside of the business.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things, I think, are a much bigger factor than I probably took it to be even some years, a few years ago.
Yeah, interesting. This has been a great chat, and I really, really appreciate your time.
Been
Before we
great.
go, 5 quick questions.
5 quick questions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Get
Here we
ready.
go.
And I haven't prepped you. I'll tell the audience that you haven't been prepped.
I haven't been prepped for this.
All right. What does success mean to you personally?
That's you don't prep for these ones. You just throw that out, don't you? What is success? Success for me is that ability to be able to help drive my personal purpose. So, and that's really, if you take aside the performance of the end game as a business, my personal purpose is really around providing that helping handle, that ability to sort of take a founder and be able to provide something that they haven't been able to get anywhere else. And maybe if I answer it in a slightly different way, the times when I get the greatest feelings from the work that we do is when you see the difference, the emotional difference from a founder. I've had people, family businesses in our office in tears saying, this is the first time anybody's ever understood what I'm talking about. I've been battling with this for years. Those sorts of things is exactly what success is to me. When I see those things, it's certainly far more important than the financial performance of the company.
I love that. What does happiness mean to you, Adrian?
Happiness is probably less about trying to go and grab the next big thing, less about trying to pursue great amounts of happiness. Happiness is probably more about making sure that you take away the things in life that cause you to be unhappy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the reverse engineer.
You reverse engineer it. If you take those things away, then you tend to be happy.
What does your morning routine ordinarily look like?
Morning routine is, generally speaking, sort of 5:30. Usually go out and do some sort of exercise, be either jumping on the treadmill or going out for a walk or jumping on a bike or something like that. Typically, some sort of exercise first up, and before the kids wake up, and then it's helping them do their things. It's incredible how even after many years, they still sometimes don't know how to do the basic things. So helping them along with those sorts of things in the morning, and then it's pretty much off of that. But I really do try and get some exercise early in the morning. I've always found it's difficult. It's difficult to make time for that later in the day. So that's a bit of a routine.
Love it. And a piece of advice you'd give your younger self that you could put on a billboard for the world to see?
Piece of advice I'd give my younger self. That's an interesting one. I mean, I guess probably I'm sort of thinking down the paths of just don't worry about it so much. Don't stress so much. It will be okay.
It will be okay.
Things will be fine. You don't need to worry about it so much. I mean, I get a lot of as no doubt you do, a lot of purpose and a lot of life enjoyment out of delivering results for others, delivering results for myself, meeting targets, meeting objectives. But I think probably the other side to that is there's certainly been times in my life where I have felt the pressure, or I've ended up in a state of unhappiness because I've certainly over-indexed on that and thought to myself that meeting that target or that objective was so important that it could be at the detriment of so many
Everything.
other things,
Yeah.
or that not meeting that could end me in a depressed state. I think that's the thing that just don't worry so much about it.
Love it. A guest that you know who you think would be a great person to come on the show.
You've already had Lockie on the show,
have
haven't you? You've already
Lockie
had Lockie on the show. So, put me on the spot there.
Which I must thank him for connecting yourself.
Yeah, he connected us up yesterday. Who can we get on the show? I'll have to give that one a bit of thought.
Okay.
I'll come back to you.
Adrian Nisbet, thank you, mate.
Thank you very much
for your time, and keep doing what you're doing. It's inspiring.
Thanks, Richard. Really enjoyed having a chat to you. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're sitting in a boardroom debating the future, turn to the person next to you and tell them all about the show. It really means a lot. A huge thank you to Adrian for sharing his lessons to help founders design their end game with intention. If today's conversation inspires you to think bigger and act sooner, please subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, peace.